Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for another Skylanders Week video here on the channel. And naturally it's occurring only a few hours after I reviewed Skylanders Spyro's Adventure, so today we're talking about its sequel, Skylanders Giants, the game in which from the entirety of the Skylanders franchise easily had the shortest development cycle, and unfortunately it shows because it takes up far too many similarities to its predecessor and does very little in the wake of revolutionising the gameplay formula for the franchise. However, even though the physics engine, art direction and mechanics are practically the same, there are some refinements made in here. So the game has its own identity, even if it does have a similar feeling to what DLC would be to that of Spyro's Adventure, and now we're going to do none other than talk about it. So this time around the gameplay is provided by Loopy Longplays, but starting off with a level design, the themes and settings are much more varied than that of Spyro's Adventure. You go from a private carnival to an ice world, for example. This makes level settings more distinguishable and unique compared to that of the last one. A fatal flaw improved from that of Spyro's Adventure, but unfortunately levels can be hit and miss. Take that ice world for example. Ice levels can feel generic. It's a traditional setting for many games to take up, and worse yet, of course, naturally in these levels, ice physics ensue, and the ice physics here are none other than tedious and annoying, making it a rather big drag of a level in the playthrough. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have the genius, which is Jellex's big rig, a massive rig in the sky where for a final boss you beat down a singing drill. That level of creativity and theming is unparalleled. There is no other level put in a setting like this one, not only in Giants, but in the entirety of the Skylanders franchise, and it's a shame really that it's mixed in with many inferior and tedious level designs. However, the execution of the levels is just as great as always. Collectibles are very cleverly hidden to really reward your sense of exploration and longing to discover. There are additional minigames in the form of Skystones to give you fresh gameplay elements to enjoy, ensuring the pacing is constantly moving forward, since the variety ensures you're never going to be made bored by a single thing lasting too long within the gameplay, is what I'm trying to go as far to say right here. Anyways, as for the game's name, it is of course centered around the new figurines we collect for Giants. There is a new giant for every element, and so the levels are wider and more expansive, and some of them even go to the extent of feeling almost open world, which is genius level design to complement the size of these giants. And giants even have exclusive abilities such as feats of strength and picking up objects, so you're encouraged to hone into their power and cause magnificent chaos, which is so much fun to cause because it's so satisfying knowing you're the one who's causing it. So again, the quality of the levels, creativity, design work, and advantage of the physics engine can be a huge mixed bag. Even if Spyro's Adventure did get a little repetitive at points, it was at least much more consistent and held your attention span much longer, since this game doesn't have much of a reliance on breaking the fourth wall and providing unparalleled immersion, unlike Spyro's Adventure. And naturally that's where your attention can be lost at times, but ultimately it's not as necessary as Spyro's Adventure due to it just having so much raw fun, which the game of course presents itself with. But when it comes down to the gameplay mechanics and visuals, it has the same strengths and weaknesses of Spyro's Adventure, since they are practically completely carried over here. So just as a quick summary, the game looks fine, but not much more than that. The colours don't really pop and textures are basic. The gameplay mechanics are fun and explore great progression, as you have an upgrade chamber to improve your Skylanders abilities and physique as you move through the game, collecting treasure and gold. Now, the gameplay ran the risk of being nothing but a button mashing mess, but due to the natural progression caused by this upgrade chamber, and that it gives you the time to bond with your Scar, this is what improves the simplistic idea to keep your investment constantly. I also love how each Scar has their own unique sets of powers, It really makes them all distinguishable, and it gives a playstyle that can, you know, really tailor towards your skill set, and that's where favourites will come into play. You might like a particular playstyle more than others, so naturally you're going to enjoy that Skada much more. However, if the personality traits aren't as strong and as distinguishable as they were in Spyro's Adventure. But really what this is doing is it's giving you different reasons to love different characters, since you're going to relate and enjoy certain personalities and of course movesets over others, whether it's a crazy fast-paced motion, well, the crazy fast-paced motion of Trigger Happy even, or the honourable, noble, knight-esque personality traits of Igknight. Great thing they brought him back as a Series 2 in this game, definitely the best decision they made for it. And so, sure, they have strong personality points, but there is a unfortunate drop in terms of their personality qualities and their distinguishable traits that I was alluding to earlier, and we'll expand upon that more. But for now, whilst we're on the topic of personality, I want to, of course, talk about the NPCs here and the fact that they have personality in boatloads, because the game reduces its cast in comparison to Spyro's Adventure, and thanks to that, each NPC is given breathing room to become more distinctive and more fun to interact with. Flynn and Callie in particular have polar opposite personalities, with Callie being the strong, single-handed warrior almost, who don't need no man. She's a strong independent woman almost, which is actually really cool when you think about it, just for might and for confidence of her character almost. And Flynn has confidence too, but he has it undeservingly, you could say. He's overly arrogant, and naturally that means that their two personality traits just bounce off each other with phenomenal chemistry that's beyond fun to watch. Like, seriously, words do not do it justice, because it really adds even more to the comedic tone of the game to keep all age demographics entertained. There you are. Chalk up something Giants actually does better than Spyro's Adventure, because the NPCs, even if the levels aren't as great, do provide some really distinctive and incredible personalities. But for Skadas, on the other hand, now that all the gibberish is gone and all the Skadas have voices, it makes the idea of these fantastical beings that live in an infinite sea of islands in the sky seem less tangible. It was a dull idea to take away their gibberish to begin with, because I expect most of these Skadas to have a form of their own language, which comes about through the gibberish, since Skylanders is a huge and expansive world. So what could harm of us if we had Skadas that spoke gibberish? You know, it just doesn't have that same kind of personality, quirk, and comedic tone that Spyro's Adventure presented itself with, as it gave all the Skadas a distinctive language of their own to make them feel as though they had their own backgrounds and everything. It truly is a shame. Now, Spyro's Adventure's story revolved around you collecting elemental sources to rebuild the Core of Light to defeat Chaos and his darkness. It's rather simple, but again, it had its interactive elements and a role that it assigned to you to keep you interested. Now, this game picks up right where Spyro's Adventure left off, with Chaos having been banished from Skylands, but now he's back and has elicited the help of an Archean Concretron to find the lost city of Arcus and its fist to grant Chaos the power over an Archean army, even. Now, the Archeans were an enemy that the Giants dealt with, being the first Skylanders and Skylands, but after they defeated the Archeans, it came with a heavy price, and they were banished all those centuries ago. Now that they've returned, thanks to us for help of the Portal Masters, and with the new threat dawning, we must stop Chaos at all costs. We even meet a ghost robot friend. He's my best ghost robot friend, and he's a really likeable NPC, but unfortunately Chaos causes his presumed, and I use that in quotation marks, death, which is, I'm not gonna lie, it's rather emotional. Not my best robot friend. I can't even speak because I'm so upset. But luckily, he comes back with the finale to assist for Skylanders in defeating Robo Chaos, who become a massive Archean robot after he found the fist in the lost city of Arcus. And this makes the final boss fight itself quite underwhelming, because Chaos simply sends his Archeans to fight, whilst Chaos and our best ghost robot friend basically duke it out in the background. But hey, Ermit is here this time. He didn't personally like the robot, but he came around showing great character development in the end, and I love that. But on a side note, I also love Ermit as a whole. His hatred of clouds is really unique and cleverly thought through, giving a really great personality that I adore interacting with. And really, all you can do is watch these two Archeans duke it out. But that can be fun visually, and you constantly need to divert your attention between fighting Chaos as Archeans and hitting him when you have the opportunity. The concentration which is required to do so makes the boss fast-paced and fun, and keeps your immersion, even if it is simple and uninspired. Now, Skylanders Spyro's Adventure just so happened to have a larger and grander scale to it, really, since you fight a freaking Hydra. How cool and far more unique and memorable is that than this? I mean, you don't actually fight the physical Hydra itself, but again, just having it in the background and knowing that that's what's been conjuring up all of these evil elemental spells is just a really great way to pay off the story and make the boss fight just so intimidating and fun to play through with such dread almost, because Chaos in Spyro's Adventure is harder, and that's what I like about it. I love a good challenge, and Giants just doesn't offer that up. Even on Nightmare mode, at most you're going to lose 1 or 2 Skylanders. Anyway, it just so happens that this story is a little less simplistic than the story of Spyro's Adventure, but you don't feel the same sense of immersion, with the lack of emphasis being put on you actually being a portal master, and for lack of fourth wall breaks. Some levels even feel unnecessary and should be skipped over altogether, because the only reason we have to play them is due to sheer inconveniences within the story. Luckily, this constant string of bad luck is given a reason behind it, since the ship we use to get from place to place, known as the Dread Yacht, it's cursed, causing all that bad luck. So sure, bad luck is a terrible tool to create for inconveniences that just so happen to push a plot forward, but at least they put a comedic spin on it. In fact, that happens for the final boss as well, as our best ghost robot friend and Ermit actually interact with one another, and their chemistry is really charming and hilarious, making the final fight tonally very entertaining, at least, which is pretty cool. So again, it's all about the comedical tones that are used to twist things up. It's still lazy writing, but I can appreciate the lazy writing a little bit more, knowing that they were a little bit more self-aware of the lazy writing and shoehorned something in to give it a nice comedic twist, almost. So most flaws in this game have direct strengths to outweigh them, is what I'm saying in other words. The design of the platforming and the elemental gates are also slightly better here, with more memorable sections to enjoy, and on top of all of this, the music. Oh my gosh, the music is so phenomenal, to no one's surprise, because it just takes what was so great about Spyro's Adventure and ups it, because you have such a grand feeling, and it really does build up atmosphere to further increase tension and enjoyment in these levels, as well as really bring out the emotions when your best ghost robot friend is crushed by a bunch of rocks in the pursuit of saving you. Oh, the noble heroic sacrifices. I need to move on before I wind up in tears, because truth be told, the level themes, as in the soundtrack themes, feel like expansions of the levels in and of themselves. They're really unique and cleverly tied in to make each level all the more fun and immersive. So I would happily say that they took the music from Spyro's Adventure and made it even better for this game. I truly can't emphasise that enough, which is why I'm repeating it. It's going to be an attempt for me to do so at least, and now it's really saying something with just how good the music was already. Now, the Dread Yacht, whilst being cursed, isn't the most interesting hub world either. It's small, which really goes against the theme of the game, since we're talking about giants here, and that's a huge missed opportunity. Why is the game that's called Giants possessing the smallest hub world in the entirety of the Skylanders franchise? There is no intrigue to the exploration whatsoever, since you can go from one end of the world to the other in about 30 seconds. Within 5 minutes, you've discovered everything that the hub world has to offer, and the entire thing is unlocked come the 3rd level, for Pete's sake. You don't gradually unlock things like Spyro's Adventure, where you didn't unlock the entire hub world until the 18th chapter. The game doesn't even have 18 chapters without Adventure Pack levels, which are the exact same as the Spyro's Adventure Adventure Pack levels. But hey, it's still cool to it here. I like the idea of tackling these older levels with the newer Skylanders and the Giants, because that is, of course, a rather nice touch. But regardless, there is just such a lack of explorability and it doesn't give you much encouragement to progress with just how small and dull this hub world really is. Since, you know, Spyro's Adventure, you wanted to discover all of the areas of the ruins. You wanted to be given the rewards of exploring it in the form of winged sapphires to make upgrading a lot more easier. But here, the only things that really change in the hub world is that certain winged sapphires appear after certain levels, but then you're exploring the same areas all over again, hoping that this area, this exact same area even, has something different this time you see it. It does get really dull and stale after a while. It's not the most memorable hub world by miles, will go as far to say, and I don't like the fact that you can play as big, massive, bulky giant Skylanders in a tiny hub world. But at least it's customizable, so it has that going for it. But in conclusion, this game has phenomenal music, which really helps aid the experience and unique feel of each level, which vary drastically in quality and can really negatively affect the pacing. But still, a mixed bag is better than Spyro's Adventures, where it had a little too much repetitive for my taste, or repetition to be more grammatically correct. Now, speaking of Spyro's Adventure, this game does have a few minor refinements to the gameplay mechanics, and more things to do in levels to act as distractions from the combat, and ultimately offer up more fresh and engaging experiences to ensure that you aren't bored by the same mechanics being rinsed and repeated. An entire level revolves around you piloting an Archean craft, for example, and that is so fun and distinctive in its gameplay style, and that's nice to see. What's also nice to see is that NPCs here are more fleshed out with arcs and greater interactions to make for phenomenal chemistry, put in a greater entertainment value and greater comedic twist onto the tone of the story, and make you more interested in interacting and getting to learn these NPCs' traits and quirks. Can't say the same for the Skylanders though, since they lost their gibberish, and now they all have speaking lines, which gives them all too much of a feeling of familiarity, and I don't want that, because this isn't a familiar world. I want to be invested in a world beyond my own. I don't want to be reminded of my own country and my own language every single time I place a Skylander on the portal. I want that escapism, and so without that gibberish that is beyond our language, it doesn't provide any of that. And it takes away the idea of them having distinguished backgrounds based on how unique their voice became through the use of said gibberish. The final boss fight is really underwhelming, with it only requiring you to hit Chaos physically a few times. It's a mashup of what's came in the game before already, and rather than a true final challenge, unlike that of Spyro's Adventure, that threw new things at you all the time while still managing to be a culmination of everything you've learned thus far. So it's just not a greater balance, really. Especially in comparison to that of Spyro's Adventure, the difficulty doesn't help it out either, but for the very minimum, I can at least say that the other boss fights, Chompy Mage and Drillex by name, more than make up for it, with their unique and distinguishable personalities, which add a surprising amount of charm, and on top of all of that, they take great advantage of the game's mechanics even. Since you can't jump, instead you need to dodge obstacles and use mechanics from the levels to shift between worlds to avoid being hit by projectiles. In the case of a Chompy Mage or with Drillex, each phase shifts up, so you have to go from using cover to avoid rocks being flung at your face, to instead jumping over his massive drill using bounce pads. It's all really cool stuff, to say the least. Now, the hub world is small, dull, and rather interesting, taking away your longing for progression, since the ruins of Spyro's Adventure unlock slowly and give you a greater sense of reward for said progression. And this story is only just a slight more complex than that of Spyro's Adventure, but not nearly as immersive without the fourth wall breaks and the reliance on poor luck creating inconveniences for the plot moving forward. Half of the levels wouldn't have even occurred without this plot being built on such lazy writing. So overall, the game didn't have the same innovative model even as Spyro's Adventure when it came down to its business, because it didn't take advantage of its Toys to Life aspect to the same degree. So here, it just simply exists. It doesn't feel as clever because it's simply not acknowledged as well. Therefore, this game isn't really innovating anything. However, it's still a great game. As I said earlier, most of its flaws are compensated for by its strengths, and that alone makes it a great game that I thoroughly enjoy. And its highlights are some of the greatest of the entirety of the Skylanders franchise. I mean, come on. A singing drill. You're hearing me right? I still can't get over how genius that is. Almost 8 years later, the game is just so full to the brim with charming and creative ideas to offer up some thorough enjoyment and satisfaction. But that's all I have to say about this great game. So naturally it is one step below being innovative due to it just not taking as much of an advantage through its story of the Toys to Life element as what Spyro's Adventure did, and I would have preferred it taking that angle rather than it relying on its own Archean-esque story, even though it does serve as a great expansion of the Spyro's Adventure story. These are just themes that were established in Spyro's Adventure, and they are just far more evident and expanded upon in this title, so it serves its purpose as a sequel very well indeed. But naturally, with all that being said and done, you'll be seeing me again tomorrow for my Skylanders Swap Force review, and until that moment arises, peace! And thank you so much as always for watching.